My name is Ben Matthias. This is Miss Melyssa Bauer, and Zach Hansen is behind the camera. We'll be interviewing her for our oral history. Okay, so starting off, how was your life growing up in West Milwaukee, like community-wise, traditions?
So it was pretty average, I think. It was a community that was very close, like you knew your neighbors, you could talk to your neighbors when you'd go outside, you'd know people by name. Pretty peaceful for the most part, and just really kind of a relaxed neighborhood, and it was always really pleasant.
For example, could you leave your door unlocked, like there was no problems in your neighborhood or anything?
I don't think we ever left the door unlocked, just because I had a mother that was very big on safety. So, but it was a sense of safety. I don't think I ever felt like we were unsafe. So, like when we'd be outside playing and the door was open, until 8 o'clock at night, it was no concern.
In the area you lived, was there any sense of like commonality, like same traditions, practices?
I think really just people being outside and getting to know your neighbor and going to the park, because there was a communal park in our neighborhood too. So like going to the park on the weekends and seeing your friends that you could see in the neighborhood. That was probably some of the most things I remember. Holiday time, holiday traditions with your neighbors, cookie exchanges and things like that. So that was fun.
Did you have any specific traditions that you would do with other people?
In the neighborhood? Not really. I don't recall ever specific things that we did, unless it was just kind of like, on the weekends hanging out outside and just seeing each other and playing games and doing stuff like that.
Did you have any traditions over weekends or holidays besides going to parks and visiting families?
On Sundays, really our tradition was we would go to church, we would get hot ham and rolls, we'd go home and just spend the day as a family, so that it wasn't really about going out and doing things. It was more being together at home before the week started and before people got too busy. So it was always just kind of a family day that we would have on that Sunday.
Do you remember any games that you played with your family?
Yeah, we used to play Clue. That was one of my favorite board games. Uno was a big game we'd play. And then if we were outside, it would just be things like tag or kickball, kind of those outdoor sports.
Okay, did you also have any like Summerfest memories or like anything memorable in your early life?
So not so much Summerfest. We didn't really do Summerfest a lot, but we would go to a lot of the other festivals. So we always went to the Italian festival, we would go to German Fest and State Fair. State Fair was and still is actually something that we do every year. That was our favorite festival or our favorite place to gather, just because it was more family oriented and it was just a real Wisconsin thing. And so the State Fair was probably the one I remember the most, but otherwise the cultural ones were the ones we would visit.
Can you describe how the German Fest was?
It was, with food, good food, like fun dancing, things like that, music, kind of specific German music. But that's really all I remember of German Fest.
Okay, how was your family life with your father as a psychologist and mother as a weather reporter and late consumer reporter?
So it was interesting, to say the least. So when my mom was on TV, she often did the 10 o'clock news. So if I wasn't able to see her, I would actually watch the news to see my mother, because she'd come home late otherwise. And my dad worked really long hours, so he put in sometimes 16+ hour days. So by the time he would come home, it would be late at night. So they weren't both gone at the same time late at night, so it kind of, it was different times, but it was just interesting, and it actually taught me a lot about working hard, because my dad worked really hard and long hours and really loved what he did, and so did my mom. But it was interesting just because they were two different professions. So my mom was more, because she was on TV, you know, we'd go places and people would recognize her and come up and we'd have strangers talking to us. And so that was always a little weird, but I used to love watching her on TV. I always thought it was really fun. And it wasn't really a big deal that she was on TV because it felt normal. So, but yeah, it was different.
Were you always home alone, or did you have like other siblings that would be there with you to play like games or anything?
Usually it was my sister. I have an older sister. She would be home with me oftentimes, and then when she moved off to college, I was older at that point, and then it would be just me if my parents were gone or if they were home.
Did you get along with your family?
I did. I mean, my sister was much older, so by the time she was in high school and college, I was still in grade school. So we had very different, I was sort of the annoying little sister. So my sister and I could get into, you know, a few little tussles here and there, but generally we got along.
Where did you go for middle school?
Middle school, I went to Christ King.
How was that going to school there?
It was interesting. It was, so the school is in Wauwatosa. I lived in Milwaukee, and it was a different feeling being at the school if you were from the city versus being Wauwatosa. So there was a kind of a clear division that if you lived in Milwaukee, you were a city kid, and if you lived in Wauwatosa, there was just kind of this different grouping that would happen. So probably not my favorite years being in school because it felt different.
Do you think they would treat you different because you were either a suburb kid or a city kid?
For sure. Not so much teachers or anything, but students, it was very much a division, and you always kind of had the kids that were from Milwaukee and the city sort of hung out together, and the kids from Wauwatosa hung out together, and it was always sort of a little bit of a division when that would happen.
Was there any kind of diversity or like bullying or anything going on in middle school?
Not so much. I don't know if I would call it bullying, but you know, you'd get picked on a little bit more if you lived in the city. It was just kind of what they did. There wasn't a whole lot of diversity either. It was, I felt like I didn't experience more diversity till I got to high school. So, but I do think that there was a little bit more nitpicking from the Tosa kids to the city kids. So it just always was kind of that little bit of tension.
And were you part of any sports activities or events in middle school?
In middle school, I did volleyball for a little bit, so I had that as a sport. And I think I was even on the softball team for a couple of years, so those were really the two sports I did. And then aside from that, I wasn't really in a lot of clubs or anything.
Were you in any plays or like anything for like the whole school?
Yes, I actually did. We had to do a musical, or I just remember we had to pick a couple of songs from a musical, and then you had to perform that in front of the whole school. And at the time, my best friend and I did that. We did part of a production from Annie Main. That's what I remember. And we sang 2 songs, and it was in front of the whole school. And that was, it was very different. It was fun. It was actually a lot of fun, but kind of terrifying at the same time.
So after Christ King, you went to St. John's. How did that change going back to the city or like other ways?
Yeah, it was a lot more diverse being at St. John's, for sure. It was an all-girls school, and the girls came from all different backgrounds, so all different parts of the city, different religions, different cultures, and I really liked it because for the first time in school, I actually felt like I could kind of start to spread my wings and come into my own, because there didn't feel like there was judgment. You know, we were all kind of from the same backgrounds, really, just different parts of town, and everybody really got along very well for the most part. So it was very diverse, but just a lot of really good groups of girls.
Are you in contact with any of them still?
I am, actually. There's a few that I'm still in contact with, more so through Facebook, but yeah, I still have some of my friends that I went to school with.
Where did you go after that?
So after St. Joe and Antietam, I went to Mount Mary now it's Mount Mary University. At the time, it was Mount Mary College, and that's also an all-female school. So I went there to study fashion design. So that was my college time.
Was there any reason why you went there? Like, did your friends go there?
No, actually none of my friends went there. So partly it was close to where I lived. It actually was across the street from where I grew up. And when I was a kid, I always saw the campus. I walked around the campus. It was right outside our front window, and I just always thought it was a beautiful school. But I did like that it was an all-female college because I liked that feeling in high school. It gave me more of an opportunity to focus on my studies and just kind of form friendships with people and not worry about too many other things. And I wanted to study fashion design and not really move away at that time. And Mount Mary was very well known and still is actually for fashion design. They're one of the top schools in the country. So it just kind of worked out that that was what I wanted to do, and I lived at home so I could walk across the street and go to school.
Did you know right away that you wanted to do fashion design?
No, I did not. I'm not even sure at what point I decided that was going to be my major, but I always had loved fashion, and it was just something I really enjoyed. And I thought, well, I was artistic and I liked to do different things and have ideas to be creative, and I thought, let's see where it takes me. So that was really it.
Did someone introduce you to any of that?
Probably my sister. Because she was so much older than me, she also had worked, she was working jobs by the time I was growing up. So she worked in a lot of female clothing stores, and she loved fashion. It was just something that was always her thing, and she and I would actually watch fashion shows on Saturday mornings. They had them on one of the channels, so we would watch that, and that's kind of where I think a lot of the interest kind of sparked for me. So that's probably where I got a lot of the influence when I first was younger.
And then what made you move to New York City?
Well, I thought I was going to continue designing clothing, and I thought maybe because there's such a fashion capital in the world that I was going to go and I was going to design, and I also wanted to go to graduate school. So I was going out there for that as well. And so that was really the original path I was on until I found that the graduate school wasn't so much what I wanted to do. So then I was living out there and I had to figure out where I was going to go from there. But I had always loved New York, and I just had always wanted to live there. And so when I was ready to move out, that was where I wanted to go.
What led up to that moment? Was it like stressful, nervous?
Yes, all of the above. It was very stressful because I was moving from my parents' house to the city, which is, so much bigger than Milwaukee. So it was just stressful trying to find a place to live, trying to figure out finances because it's such an expensive city. What am I going to do for a job if I don't want to do the school? So it was all kinds of unknowns. So it was stressful and I was nervous, but I think at the same time I was really excited because it was the first time I was going to be completely on my own, and I really liked being independent and sort of having to figure things out. So I was really excited, but it was all of those feelings wrapped in one.
Could you describe the difference from Milwaukee to New York, like the atmosphere, the people?
Sure. Definitely a difference in people, not necessarily. I think a lot of people think New Yorkers can be rude and, sort of abrupt, and that can be the case, but I think definitely Milwaukee is more of a feeling of community because it's so much smaller. So that feeling of community, or like running into people that you may just not see every day, but you run into them maybe at the supermarket, and New York is so much bigger. So you kind of, I think for me, sometimes I kind of felt you can get really lonely even though the city is filled with so many things because everybody's busy and it's just, it's a fast city. Whereas here in Milwaukee, it's smaller and there's more of a sense of community and there's things to do and you always can find people to talk to, and so it was just, the pace was very different. Milwaukee's a lot slower compared to New York. It's a lot faster out there.
Do you prefer Milwaukee or New York?
Now at this point, I would say Milwaukee. When I was younger, I thought that was where I was going to want to stay and live and be in New York the rest of my life. But coming back to Milwaukee, I really found, being older too, that there were so many things from my childhood and my roots from being here that now I can't see myself leaving Milwaukee. It's where I am and where I'm, I plan to stay. So, it felt more natural to be back here. So I would say now I prefer being here, and New York is nice to visit.
Why did you leave New York?
Part of it was because my sister was having a baby, so it was the excitement of our family expanding, and I wanted to be a part of that. So that was one of the big reasons. I also was missing my family and knowing all the things that were going on here with family and friends, and I was kind of missing out on everything. I just felt like it was the time to come back, and it was a way that I could then be a part of my sister's life with my nephew and just be more of an adult now back in Milwaukee versus when I was younger. So yeah.
Can you talk about Walt Disney and like the pin competition when you had that job?
Sure. So I started working for Disney after the graduate school thing, and I was actually working for them in a training capacity. But there was a contest that they ran throughout all of the Walt Disney Company. So it was over 50,000 people could participate in this contest. And it was to design a pin for pin trading and pin collecting, which is a big deal in Disney. So I decided to do it, and I was one of 2 winners at our location. There were winners around the country, but it was a very small select group of people that won this competition, and I was one of them. And it was a limited edition pin that they put out, and it was sold. And I got to, the store I was in was on 5th Avenue, so they set up a pin signing so people could come and get me to sign their pin. And it was just it was a unique experience, to say the least, and I felt like it was a way to still be creative and use the design skills that I really went to school for and was excited to do, but I just did it in a different capacity.
Did your family congratulate you or fly out to you during any of those periods?
They did. They were super excited. So it was actually my parents and my grandma that came out for the event. And they were so excited and so supportive through the whole thing. And they stayed for the whole event and all the signing, and just had a really good time. They really enjoyed it. And it was awesome to have them there, because it was not a lot of other people had that same kind of support. So my family coming out just felt so nice.
What made you push to do the competition?
Actually, it was my dad. I had gone home to visit, and I told my parents that there was this competition, and I didn't know if I was going to do it. And my dad thought immediately that I should do it. He's like, "Why wouldn't you try it?" And so he and I actually talked about it and came up with the idea, and I was able to sketch it and draw it, and I had everything ready to go. So when I got back to work, I was able to submit my pin. So.
Do you think you and your dad had a good relationship?
Yeah, for sure. We were super close. My whole family was really close, but he was always sort of the words of wisdom. If I had a problem, I'd call my dad. If I needed advice, I'd call my dad. If I didn't know what to do as I was coming into my adult age, I would talk to my dad. He just always was sort of he just always felt very wise, and so I used him a lot for conversations and advice and, what should I do kind of thing. But we had a good time too. I mean, we would hang out and do stuff and just enjoy each other's company, which was good.
What did you do after the Walt Disney stuff?
So after I did that, when I moved back to Milwaukee, I started working for Apple. And I was working as an HR person for Apple, but we opened our store the day that the iPhone launched. So that was kind of a big pivotal thing, being at Apple. And then really from there, I just continued my career. I went from Apple to Nordstrom. That was kind of where I went from that.
Can you talk more about Apple and how the phone launched?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So it was when the original iPhone came out, so nobody had really touched it or seen it yet in the world. So when our store opened at Bayshore, down in Glendale, we launched, that was the day the iPhone launched. And so probably about an hour before store open, they gave all of us an iPhone so that we could, they actually gave it to us as a gift, but it was also so we could touch it and start playing with it, and so we could explain and talk about it with our customers. So it was kind of crazy, and we had a line of people. It was longer than around the block. I mean, it was just a ton of people, and when we opened our doors, it was hours and hours of people shopping for the iPhone, and that was super exciting because it was kind of a historical moment, because that was the first time iPhone got into anybody's hands. So I was really excited to be a part of that, because that was pretty cool. Because now, I mean, we all have iPhones, but back in the day that wasn't a thing until Apple. So it was pretty exciting.
What encouraged you to start working for Apple after?
It was really, actually, it was a friend of mine, because I was looking for work in New York at the time. I was looking for work in Milwaukee, so that when I moved home, I had a job. And I had a friend that worked at Apple, and they knew this new store was going to be opening, so they were hiring for positions, and that was kind of how the conversation got started. And I never thought I would work for a technology company, because I am not very technology savvy, but it actually was, it was really cool, and I learned a lot, and now I don't use anything but Apple products.
Did anything else encourage you to move back besides your family and like looking for another job? Did you miss like the community?
I did. I really missed that feeling of just, I guess to me, I always feel comfort when I think about home for me, which is Milwaukee. It's just a comfort feeling. It is a city that has a lot of diversity. There's a lot of different things to do, but you don't feel like there's so much that you get swallowed up in it. And I really did enjoy seeing my family and seeing my friends and having that sense of peace. So to be able to come home and be able to start building my adult life and being here, even, just doing things like being able to like drive to Cedarburg for a day, or if you want to kind of go somewhere outside of the city, you have that ability. So I feel like there's a lot to do, and I just feel like it always kind of pulled me back, because I always found it just really comfortable.
What was the first thing you did when you came back to Milwaukee? Like, did you go out with your family and friends? Or?
Gosh, I don't even know, to be honest. It feels like so long ago. I mean, quite honestly, I think all I did for the first couple of days was just I was moving into a new apartment, so it was moving into the apartment and getting settled, and I think it was just kind of a few days of readjusting to it, because it is a little bit smaller and it's not like so much noise and so many things happening. So I think I just kind of spent time getting myself settled, but I also spent a lot of time then seeing my family and seeing like my grandparents and being around the people I haven't been able to do that with.
Do you think it's common for people to move back with their family?
Yeah, sometimes I do. I think whether it's circumstances of, just trying to help family members out, or, whether it's just you're saving money for something. But I think, I do think it happens more times than I think, I would probably expect. So, yeah, I think it can be pretty common.
Later on, did you move in with your family or grandparents or any of that?
I did. My grandma had a duplex in Wauwatosa, and I actually moved upstairs from her. And at the time, she did have some daytime help, but I then was there as someone that would be around if she needed something, or I would sometimes take her out places. So it was, I still had my space because I lived above her, but it was really kind of fun having my grandma downstairs, because it was that comfort that my grandma was there. So that was, I moved in with her to kind of help with that, and also to move back to the west side of Milwaukee, because I was living on the east side at the time. So
would you think there's any change from moving to west to east?
A little bit. I feel like on the east side you do have a little bit more, sometimes walkability. Like you can pop out and you can be close to things, and it's a little busier. Whereas I think on the west side, maybe not as much unless you have things in your neighborhood that you can walk to. But I think what I really like about being on the side of town where I grew up and where I'm at is for that reason. Like in my community now, I have a coffee shop I can walk to. I have a grocery store I can walk to. I have things that are accessible, parks, and I don't have to always get in my car. And I like that it's a little quieter than the east side. I still love the east side, but I like to visit. I don't necessarily want to live there.
Did you find it easier finding new people and like friends versus like coming back?
I think yes and no. Maybe, in the sense of like being in a new job was helpful. So I think where it was kind of hard at first was like, how do you go out and meet people? I was never really good at that. Like, where do I go just to meet people? But when you have a job, and I met different people that I worked with, and then, you kind of meet friends of friends. And so that sort of helped. I think having jobs is really the way I have kind of built a friendship base.
After going and when working with Apple, did you have like more of like friendships with people there too?
I did. I actually still have some friends from Apple. And so it was just a really good group of people, a lot of fun, people that I still, will see from there. It's just like a lot of good energy. We all have really good energy there. So I did make some good friends working there.
Where did you go after Apple?
So after Apple, I went to Nordstrom. And I actually went to Nordstrom Rack and then to Nordstrom, the full line store. There's kind of two separates, but both in Milwaukee. And when I started at Nordstrom Rack, it was a brand new store opening. So that was pretty exciting. It was, we were actually able to go on site. We'd have to wear construction hats and everything because we were working out of a hotel until the building was finalized. So we would go see the building and watch it be built from the ground up. And then when we were all ready to move in, we all had to actually help move product and get the store ready. And so I was with Nordstrom for a number of years, I think a little over 5 years. But it was a fun experience there too.
What did they mainly do there?
So Nordstrom sells a lot of different things. So men's, women's, children's, clothing and shoes and accessories, basically anything you can think of for a department store. And my responsibility there, I worked in an HR capacity, so I worked a lot with helping to hire for the store. If there were any issues that went on in the store, I was kind of a liaison for that, and just kind of generally being a go-to person for the employees in the store.
Did you like your job there?
I did. I did. I still have friends from there too. And I really enjoyed my job because I really like people. So I liked that, I could engage with everybody every day. Even with customers, I'd go out on the sales floor. I just liked to be around that energy. But I really liked helping our employees, and I would have us participate in community things, and I'd have us volunteer for stuff. And so I just always really enjoyed my job there. It was pretty fun.
Do you think you worked long hours, or was some days tiring or anything?
Yes, I would say yes. But it's sometimes I kind of would look at it. It wasn't every day that it would be too long or too crazy. But when you kind of have those one-off days, I think really just kind of taking a pause for a minute and collecting yourself and just knowing that you're going to get through is fine. But I will say when long days are done, it's very nice to go home and shut the door and just do nothing and sit in silence.
Did any other jobs do you miss?
From Apple and Nordstrom?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I miss parts of each job I've had. Maybe not necessarily so much the company part, but people, some of the people I miss, and different functions that I did in my jobs that were different at each company. I miss some of those things. And just retail life is different in the sense of just there's always something different that goes on. There's a lot of personalities and a lot of people, and just Sometimes it can be crazy and sometimes it makes you laugh. So there are things I miss, but I think a lot of it is more related to the people and who I interacted with and what we would do.
Which job do you think was like your favorite?
I don't know. Maybe Nordstrom. I mean, I loved Apple too. And I think for me it was because the technology piece, as much as I love Apple products, because I do use all of them and that's all I use now. But I think because technology, I love to use it, I don't necessarily like to live and breathe it every day. And at Apple, you kind of have to because it's all technology. So at Nordstrom, it was just different because it was clothing and it was things that I enjoy, that I genuinely enjoy. So I think for me, probably pieces of Nordstrom, I miss a little bit more than I would Apple.
Going back to Apple and like selling the first iPhone, how did you feel like just holding an iPhone?
It was actually very cool at the time. You know, I'm not gonna lie. At first, when the whole thing came up, I was like, okay, well, it's a phone. But actually, you know, when it came out of the box and it was really like having a little computer in your hand. I mean, it was really crazy. And you could just kind of, everybody's energy and excitement and, you know, all the buzz and the news and just everybody's thrill of this iPhone. For the first time when I got to hold it and touch it and play with it, I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And it really was a game changer for many things in the industry. So it was like being a part of history in some way. So it was pretty cool.
Can you tell a story about how you turned down the iPhone?
Oh, I did. Yeah. So I was the one person, and probably the only person, when we were given the iPhone as a gift. I didn't use it. I had it, and I was very grateful for it, but I didn't want to change my phone carrier because at the time I would have had to change over, and there were all these things I would have to do to make my phone sort of, you know, work for me, and I just didn't want to do it. So I was like, you know, whatever. So I didn't get as excited as everybody else, and everybody, of course, thought I was crazy because it was an iPhone. But I will say later I did use it, and I loved it, and of course now I can't live without my iPhone, so yeah. But I did turn it down the first time, which was probably crazy, but I did.
So where do you currently work right now?
So currently I work for a company called Delta Defense. They are out in West Bend, and I do HR there as well. My focus, though, is on talent acquisition, so I do a lot of recruiting and hiring and working, again, with a lot of people all day long to help us hire talent in the company.
And then you also own a business in Tosa.
Yes, my husband and I have a business in the Tosa Village. It's called the Flannel Fox, and we are a boutique, so we sell men's and women's clothing and accessories, but we also sell home accents and gifts. And so I work full-time, actually work really full-time both, but I work full-time at Delta Defense during my week, and then with the store, I work the weekends, and then any behind the scenes I have to do before my work day or after. So sometimes my work day can start at 6 a.m. and end at 10 p.m., just given the two together, but yeah, that's currently what I do.
How did you run into your husband?
Oh, we actually met up north, in up north Wisconsin. So that is where he is from. And my family and I would go up there often, and he and I met. And it was, we just kind of knew each other in the community up there. So we just kind of got to know each other, and then years passed, and I actually, that's when I moved away, and I didn't meet him until I came back from New York, but I had known him prior to that. So, but once I ran into him again, we just connected and started talking, and then we started dating, and we actually dated for 12 years while he lived up north and I lived down in Milwaukee. So it was quite the dating experience.
Going back to the shop owning, like how did that start?
So he has had businesses his whole life. He has worked in small business, and we knew early on in our relationship that if we were going to then get married and settle, he wanted to settle down here in Milwaukee, and we thought it would be really fun because he wanted to still continue having a small business, but we thought it would be fun to do it together. So that's kind of how that all came up. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about it and talking about it, and then at the end of 2019 we found a space, and we had been kind of preparing to move in together and do all of those things, so everything just kind of worked out time-wise, and we wanted to be in the Wauwatosa village because it is such a community-based area, and we knew we would fit well there. So that's kind of how it started, and then we just built from there.
Was it stressful starting the business?
Yes, it was very stressful. It was the end of 2019, and then as we came into 2020, we signed the lease for the space, but of course COVID hit. And so we signed our lease, and that was when the whole world shut down, and so we could not open the store. So it was the stress of trying to get a store running, but then it was added stress because now we couldn't even open the business, and we had to get very creative and figure out how we were going to do this because we still have to pay rent and we still have to pay money, and so it was pretty scary at the time, but we figured it out, and we started on social media, and we used that to sell product even though you couldn't have the doors open yet. So but yes, it was very stressful. Exciting, but stressful.
How was opening the store like during COVID, like after that?
It was crazy. I mean, we didn't get to open officially until the governor lifted all of the closings. So then we did get to open, but being open, we still had to abide by certain protocols because of COVID. So it was stressful because, you know, we didn't know if we were even going to get customers. Like, are people going to come and shop, and are they going to spend money? And there were all of these unknowns. So even though we were open by, I think, May of that year, it was a lot of unknowns because nobody knew what was going to happen from COVID. So.
Did you see any like COVID-19 riots in the village?
We
like,
did.
Just small businesses.
We did. They, I think they were in the summer that year, and there were, I think, 2 separate occasions riots came through, and so we had to. That was part of our stress of that year as well. So after we got to open officially, then the riots started. So then we had to actually board up our store. A lot of the stores in the village did. So we had to board everything up. We couldn't be there. And there were a lot of riots happening on other streets where there was a lot of damage to some of the businesses. We were fortunate that did not happen, but it was really scary sitting at home, like watching the news and hearing all these things and not knowing what's going to happen to a business that we just opened and just got off, kind of got off and running, and what was that going to look like. So it was scary.
Was there any other businesses that were impacted?
Not so much in the village part. You mean from the riots and stuff? It was more kind of on the North Avenue side of Wauwatosa. There were businesses that were damaged, and some had broken windows and things like that. But for the most part around us, we were really fortunate that I don't think any of us had any like major building damage.
Would you say it was like safer? Like there wasn't like a huge impact or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think when they were first happening, I think it was also keeping people away because there was still this kind of, feeling of, is it safe to kind of go there if there were just riots, or they're talking about riots and all those things. And so, people were still kind of unsure. So as business owners, then we kind of are in that same position. We were really unsure of anything at that point. Between COVID and riots, we were just like, whatever is going to happen, and we just got to roll with it. So, some of it was fear, and then at the same time, some of it was, it's out of our control, so we just have to put one foot forward and keep going.
Did you have any like accomplishments with your business or anything?
Yeah, I do think opening during COVID was a huge accomplishment because we're still here. So we just celebrated 3.5 years, which is amazing. And the fact that we did open it during a time where everything was just so crazy, and the fact that we were able to make it succeed, and we've grown over the years, is really great. And then we've gotten some really nice nods from the city and the community. So we were recognized as Best of the Burbs now for the second year in a row. It's something that happens with Milwaukee magazines, so there's a number of businesses that get nominated, and we've been nominated twice, and last year we actually won first place, which was really cool. And then we were also part of Faces of Milwaukee, which is a Milwaukee magazine thing as well, where they recognize people in the community, and so we were recognized for our store and what we've done with that, and that was really cool too. So it at least made us feel like, okay, you know, opening during COVID was okay. Because we're here, so yeah.
How did that impact you after? Like, did more people start shopping at your place?
I think it did definitely put the name out so that people knew we were there. So that has helped, you know, just having anything where your name and like where your business can kind of get some kind of attention is always good. But I do think, you know, that those have helped for people to also come into Wauwatosa and see the business, because it's not necessarily in downtown Milwaukee, we're in a suburb. So having that allows people to see that from other areas and come in too.
Going back to like all your other jobs, you told us that you worked at Harley Davidson.
Oh yeah, I did. That was after college. So after college, I went to Harley Davidson and I worked in design. So I actually used my degree and I worked in technical design, which was basically like pattern making in a sense. And so it was actually very fun. It was very different because when we would design things, we would have to, like, we had motorcycles everywhere, of course, and as you were designing, you could go and sit on the motorcycles because we had to design clothes for people riding. So we had to understand movement and how you sit and how you ride, and that was kind of fun. So like during your day, you just kind of go hang out on a Harley for a little bit to figure things out, and I did that for a little bit, and it was very cool, and especially because it is such a Milwaukee company, like it's very much iconic to who we are. So it was really neat to work there. Like people were always, if you said you worked for Harley, it was like, oh. So it was cool.
Did you design anything like huge in Harley Davidson?
Not really. We were more assistants to the actual head designer, so we didn't get to make a ton of creative decisions, which is part of the reason that I left that eventually too, because I liked being more creative, and when you can't really do it and you kind of have to be constrained to what your job is, it was still fun, but we didn't really get to do anything too crazy. You could suggest things if you thought something works better a different way, but nothing too extravagant.
And as of right now, do you have any like memories of Milwaukee that you're like proud of, or like that's your favorite thing?
Yeah, I would say, I think at this stage in my life, it would be opening our store. I just think, you know, sometimes you think about things like that, of, oh, I'd love to open a store, and you don't, you know, it may not really be realistic. And I think, you know, my husband and I worked really hard to kind of put it all together and open it, and when COVID hit, it was really kind of a scary moment. And I think the fact that we were still able to open, and we just worked to make it beautiful and ready so that when the doors opened, we were good to go. Even though COVID was a crazy year, there's good memories, at least, you know, with opening the business. So it's very much a part of who I am, and even my husband, but I have a huge love for the store. It's sort of like having a child when you have a business. You really have to tend to it 24 hours. So it's just, I think it's really exciting, and I'm proud of the fact that we made it through COVID and we survived all of that, and we're still here and still trying to make it work and make it better each year. So it's cool, and it's fun. It's fun to do.
So going back to the COVID-19 and like all the riots and everything, was there anything that like majorly impacted you, like in your neighborhood or anything?
So during COVID and the riots, we actually had a lot of riots in our neighborhood, which was very different because I had never experienced riots, quite frankly. So during the summer of 2020, we actually had 2 riots go through our neighborhood. One was in the middle of the night, so it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I heard it, my husband did not. So I got up, and when I looked out the window, there were literally hundreds of people in our neighborhood. And the street we live in just a community, so the street is somewhat close to the house, so people were literally not that far from our windows. Some that were carrying guns, and it was very off-putting, to say the least. It was scary. And then I woke my husband up, and it lasted for probably at least a half hour, and they went through all the streets, and I remember they had cars and honking the horns, and it was a lot. And so that was really scary. It was just different, and there was no damage, so that part was good. But I think part of where the fear came was you didn't really know if anything was going to get damaged or if people were going to do anything. But it was, for the most part, pretty peaceful, just noisy. And then actually shortly after that, we had another riot come through our neighborhood, and that was actually on a Sunday afternoon. And I only remember that because my in-laws were at my house having dinner. And so all of a sudden, we heard noise outside, and I have very large picture windows. And all of a sudden, I could just see a swarm of people coming through, and it was another riot, and they were going through the streets in the neighborhood. And again, nothing got damaged. It was just more loud than anything. And so that was very different. So it was one of those moments where you realize that even if you live in a community where you feel like safe and comfortable, that these things can still happen. And it just kind of makes you, I think, a little bit more aware of stuff, and also grateful that nothing bad happened from it either.
You also mentioned your fashion and designing. Did you design anything super important that you remember?
Not really career-wise, not so much. When I was in school, though, we learned a lot. So we had to learn really old school fashion skills. We had to know how to tailor a suit, which if you've never tailored a suit, that is quite a process. So that took many, many hours. But I also actually did make a wedding dress. We had to learn how to do couture designing, which is basically a lot of hand sewing, a lot of different very detailed things. And the wedding dress had, I don't even know how many hundreds of feathers on it. So I literally had to hand stitch every single feather to this dress, hours and hours and hours. But it was beautiful in the end, and I had them in a fashion show, and it was exciting to see the result at the end. So yeah, I don't know if I'd want to do it again though.
And then you mentioned designing Ronald McDonald's fantasy house. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So my husband and I got invited to work or to participate in the Ronald McDonald House in 2022. So the Ronald McDonald House, every year at Christmas, they do something called the Christmas Fantasy House, and they sell tickets, and that is what helps raise money so that they can put other efforts and expand amenities at the Ronald McDonald House. So every year they have a family that actually has to move out of their home for a whole week, so all kinds of people can come in and decorate it for Christmas, and then they have people buy tickets to see it. So my husband and I got invited in 2022 to do this, and we were super excited and really honored to be asked, because many of the people that get invited are interior designers and artists and people that do that as a profession. And my husband and I, we are not interior designers. We design things in the store and we merchandise, but it was just a cool experience to be invited. So what we had to do was you get a preview night where you go to the house, you get to walk around, you get to pick 3 rooms that you would like to decorate, and then the committee decides which room you get. So in 2022, the house that was chosen was actually, it's a historical building from UWM. So it is their old alumni building that a gentleman bought, and he's been restoring it, and now it's his home. But it's really beautiful, and he he actually has a room in this house dedicated to UWM and the alumni. So it's got like the old registers from school. It has all these really cool artifacts that he kept in there. And he's been just remodeling the home to make it really special. So, but it's a historical building, so the rooms were very old and really beautiful. So we got the billiard room. So it had a beautiful pool table and it had all this artwork in it, much of which he took out because then we could decorate. And so you get 3 days to decorate. So for 3 days, we would be there from morning until 10 o'clock at night. We had to get a moving van so that we could take all of our product and all the trees and everything we needed to decorate. And we spent 3 solid days in this billiard room decorating. And it turned out beautiful. And when the house opens, then people buy the tickets, they come through. They also get to see your business and who you are, so you get exposure. But it was just such a cool thing to participate. I actually used to volunteer for the Ronald McDonald House. So I love what they do. And when we were asked to do it, we were like, it's such a great cause, and we were so happy to be asked. So we did that, and then you get 3 days to take it down. So it's a very fast experience, but it's a lot of fun. And we got to meet a lot of people, and we got to be a part of this beautiful historic building that, when we got to walk around and look at, was really, truly amazing. So it was really cool. It was exciting. So we were glad we did it. We actually, they showed us on TV, and we got to do TV interviews, and they had us in like a bunch of print articles about it. So it was a pretty big experience for us.
What did you design and like decorate in that house?
So he had a lot of shelves in there, which I think was when we first got the room. I think my husband and I both were a little, like, it was a lot to look at to figure out how to design and put something together with all these shelves and all this empty space. So we kind of had an idea in our mind as far as we wanted silver and white. Like, that was just kind of the initial thought, because the room was painted this beautiful dark blue kind of color, so the silver and white would pop. So when we were in the room, it was really a lot of just talking it through, like, what if we do this, what if we do that? And so we managed to just kind of talk up a plan about what we wanted to do, and it really was silver and white was the theme, and that was how we started there. And then everything from there was, we had an enormous tree. I think it was, oh my gosh, it was probably 10 feet, maybe even taller. It was very tall, that we had to fully decorate. We had multiple trees in there, and then we just kind of, as we started doing it, it gave us other ideas, and so then some of those ideas morphed into something different, but it was just a lot of talking it through. And also, when you're putting things up and you're looking at it, it's also a lot of maybe not, we thought this would work, it really doesn't, and then you do something different, and then something happens, it looks amazing, and then you're good to go. So we didn't have a real solid plan until we kind of started being in the room and putting things out and figuring out where they were going to go and what that would look like. So we did basically take an empty room and made it into this giant Christmas wonderland. It was pretty amazing. It was cool.
How did it feel being on TV and everything, getting interviewed?
It was fun. So my husband doesn't like to do any of it, so I had to do all of it. And it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed sharing and talking about it and having people see it, and and just giving exposure to the Ronald McDonald House, giving exposure to the business, and just kind of showing people what we had. So it was fun.